What's the difference between a punishment and a consequence? Well, I can think of 5 ways they're different, and if you know what those 5 ways are, it's going to change your parenting and your kids. Let's get started with the first way that they're different. A punishment is often motivated out of anger, but a consequence is motivated out of love. Let me show you what I mean about that. We have these terms, consequence and punishment, and lots of parents just look at people who use these words and say, aren't you just playing with words and trying to make it sound nice now? No, we're not. They are very different. Let me give you an example. Let's say you're in your parenting mode and all of a sudden your kid is doing something like this. How do you usually feel? Well, I don't know about you, but I often can feel like this. A little frustrated, a little overwhelmed. That can turn into really getting annoyed. And before you know it, we are getting angry at our kid. But as we get to this point, we need to draw the curtain down on this and start asking ourselves some real questions, because at this point, if we're going to parent right now, we're going to start punishing our kids rather than looking for consequences that are going to help. And the only way to know the difference between those things is to ask ourselves this question: what does it mean to discipline our kids? Well, discipline itself has a very interesting meaning. You see, when we're going to discipline kids, the word discipline and disciple come from the same root words in Hebrew and Greek. The reality is that discipling our kids comes in the form of modeling and instructing and talking and practicing and correcting our kids. When we're looking to discipline, we're really looking to disciple our kids. So consequences are important, but those consequences need to use firm correction with a positive focus. That's what's going to change the hearts of our kids. It's when we're using consequences that we're motivated by love, because we're looking at the future. And that's what brings us to the second way that this concept of a punishment or a consequence is different. You see, punishments focus on past misdeeds, whereas a consequence focuses on the future and the right way to do it next time. To understand this, let's take a look at your child's heart, and let's have a map mentality in mind. When we have a map mentality, we start at point A on the map of your child's heart. Point A is what your child is doing wrong right now. Maybe they're being rude or unhelpful. Maybe they're being selfish. Maybe they're being unkind, disrespectful, dishonest. That's point A, and we spend a lot of time as parents talking about point A and why it's wrong and why they shouldn't do that. And we tell them to stop doing this and stop doing that. But what we often forget about is that there's a point B in our child's heart as well. Point B is where your kid wants to be, or at least where we want our kid to be. And so if our kid's being disrespectful, we want to develop a heart of respect. If our kid's being dishonest and lying, we want to develop honesty and integrity. Point B is whatever the opposite of point A is. And we need to start focusing on point B, because then we can tell our child to start doing this. Start being respectful. Start being honest. Start being helpful. If we stay here with the point A mentality and are only telling our kids to stop doing things, we're going to find ourselves stuck, and we can't punish our way out of point A. We need to be developing some consequences that are positively focused, that lead our child forward towards point B, where we can tell them to start doing these things. Remember, consequences are part of discipling and disciplining our kids, moving them forward and showing them the right way, instead of just sitting around telling them to stop. And while we're talking about what to stop and start doing, I want you to stop just watching this video and start hitting that like button. It really helps this video get to more parents. It's telling YouTube this is a good video, needs to get out there to more parents. It really does help. So thanks so much for hitting that like button right now. If we get our mindset out of this stop point A mentality and we start getting into start point B mentality, we're going to embrace the third way, that punishments and consequences are different. You see, a punishment is seeking just justice, but a consequence is looking to teach wisdom. Let's get back to that heart map we were talking about. Now that you see point A and point B, we need to recognize it's not enough just to tell our kids they need to start acting a certain way or start doing a certain thing. We need the roadmap for our kids. We need to show them how to get there. what specific things they need to do, specific things they need to say in order to get to point B. And the nice thing is, God's given us a lot of parenting tools to use along the journey, whether it's using the relationship we're building with our child and casting a vision for what point B can really be like, or using some firmness tools to help encourage them to move off of point A, and then actually teaching them the right way to do it. Of course, as parents, we're going to need to be praying throughout the process and coaching them and showing them the right way and giving them feedback all along the while, transferring some responsibility to our kids as well. I want you to think about it this way. You have spent plenty of time teaching your kid how to crawl, how to walk, how to talk, how to use the potty, how to get dressed for themselves, how to use a fork and a knife, how to do all kinds of basic skills like that. Well, sometimes our kids need to learn some other skills, like how to solve a problem with a friend or with a sibling, how to share a toy with someone, how to ask politely when they want to be excused from something, how to follow instructions when they're told to do something. These are all other skills they need to learn, and we need to teach them the right way to do it. That's what it means to be connecting that map by that journey map there and showing them the right way to go. We have to actually teach our kids these skills and then give them feedback when they're doing it the right way and coach them a bit to show them where they might be making a mistake and get them back on the right track. The fourth difference between a punishment and a consequence is that a punishment has a limited impact because it's negatively focused, but consequences have a lifelong impact because they focus on the heart. Let's take your kid here, for example, and let's look at his heart. Perhaps you noticed a trend in your child's heart of selfishness, and likely you've seen it in not just one case, such as hogging toys with a sister, but you've probably seen it come up in lots of different situations that your child is facing. Now, if we're going to use just punishments to try and punish this out of our kid, we're going to have to come up with individual punishments for every single one of these situations. But notice what we haven't even begun to touch. We haven't touched our kid's heart. When we're using a heart-based approach to parenting, we're going to go right for that selfishness in the heart, and we're going to ask ourselves, what's point B? Point B in this case would be something like helpfulness. We want to teach our child how to be helpful. Now, we can't tackle all these different situations at one time. We're going to pick one that we think we can win and help our kids have a win in. Maybe we say, all right, I'm going to help my child learn how to be helpful with toys with a sister and how to share toys with the sister. And so we're going to pull our child aside and have a little staff meeting with our child and coach them on some strategies that they can use with their sister when they need to share toys so they can learn how to be helpful. And as we start seeing success in that one area, we can start branching out to these other areas as well. Not all at one time, but over time, we're going to hit each one of these areas and notice what has changed. What's changed is our child's heart. The difference between a punishment and a consequence in that map there of the heart is that when we're using punishments, we were just targeting the behaviors that we were seeing and having to come up with individual punishments for everything. When we're using consequences, we're looking at the heart and we're saying to ourselves, how can I teach my child more about being selfless and helpful? What other boundaries do I maybe need to put in place in terms of firmness with my child? What do I need to teach my kid in terms of skills that they need to learn to be helpful? That's how consequences are different than punishments. The fifth difference between punishments and consequences is that punishments poorly represent God to our kids, whereas a consequence more accurately represents how God interacts with us to bring about heart change. The reality is, God has never been this punishing, punitive God. Some people have this misconception that the God of the Old Testament was this mean, punishing figure, and the New Testament's all about love. God is a God of love throughout the Bible. And what we see in the Old Testament are opportunities where God has used consequences to mold the character of his people. And he does that in the New Testament as well. God uses logical consequences, natural consequences, restricting freedoms, more parental control, and lots of other types of consequences that we can use with our children as well. But it's when we're motivated out of love and when we're looking at that point B, how can we impact the future and change your child's heart, that we're truly accurately representing God to our kids. It's a tall order for us as parents to make sure that our kids gain the right picture of who Jesus is and not the wrong picture just because we're using the wrong approach to our parenting. Understanding these differences between punishments and consequences is so important so we can stop punishing kids and start using consequences along with the other tools that God's given us to parent to truly see heart change in our kids and families. Now, if you haven't done so yet, hit that like button on this video so other families can see it as well. And if you've ever wondered why threatening your kids with punishments doesn't work, you want to check out the video I'm uploading right here. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you real soon. Bye, everyone.